In the cutthroat world of Manhattan's elite dining, a suit costs more than a car, and a reservation is harder to get than a Harvard acceptance letter. At the Gilded Fork, appearance was currency, and if you didn't look the part, you didn't exist. So, when a shivering, elderly man in a muddy, oversized raincoat stumbled through the revolving brass doors during the lunch rush, the staff didn't see a customer. They saw trash. They saw a stain on their reputation. But Emily, a waitress barely holding on to her job and drowning in debt, saw a human being. She didn't just offer him a seat. She offered him a greeting in his native tongue, a single sentence that would flip the power dynamic of the entire city. She had no idea that the beggar she was serving was actually Kenjiro Sato, the silent tycoon who owned the very ground the restaurant was built on. And he was about to serve the manager a dish best served cold. The rain in New York City didn't just wash the streets. On days like this, it felt like it was trying to drown them. It was a Tuesday in November, a grey, miserable afternoon where the wind whipped down Fifth Avenue with a vengeance. Inside the Gilded Fork, however, the weather didn't exist. The air was perfumed with the scent of white truffles and aged mahogany. The lighting was golden and warm, designed to make the diamonds on the patrons' fingers sparkle just a little brighter. This wasn't just a restaurant, it was a theatre of wealth. Emily adjusted her apron, her hands trembling slightly. She checked her reflection in the polished brass of the espresso machine. She looked tired. Dark circles were fighting against her concealer, a testament to the double shifts she had been pulling for 3 months straight. Her mother's medical bills were piling up on the kitchen counter of her tiny Queens apartment like snowdrifts, and every time the phone rang, Emily flinched, expecting it to be a debt collector. "Table 4 needs water. Now, Emily, move it." The voice snapped like a whip. It belonged to Marcus, the general manager. Marcus was a man who wore Italian suits that were too tight and a cologne that smelled like desperation and money. He didn't manage the staff. He terrorized them. "I'm going, Marcus," Emily said, grabbing the crystal pitcher. "That's yes, sir, to you," Marcus hissed, stepping into her path. He loomed over her, checking her uniform for lint with the scrutiny of a drill sergeant. "You're lucky to be here, Emily. There are 100 girls waiting outside for this job. Girls who smile brighter. Girls who don't look like they slept in a subway station." Emily bit her tongue until she tasted iron. She needed the tips. The Gilded Fork had a minimum spend of $500 per person. A good night here could pay for her mum's medication for a month. "Yes, sir," she whispered, lowering her eyes. "Good. Don't embarrass me today. We have the board of directors from the Harrington Group coming in at 2. If a spoon is out of place, you're out on the street. Do you understand?" "Understood," Emily said, sidestepping him to rush to table 4. The lunch rush was brutal. The clientele of the Gilded Fork were the masters of the universe. Hedge fund managers, tech moguls and socialites who treated the staff like furniture. Emily was invisible, a ghost in a black vest, refilling wine glasses and folding napkins while insults were casually tossed around her. By 1:30 p.m., the rain outside had turned into a torrential downpour. Thunder rattled the thick, soundproof windows. Emily was clearing plates from a table near the entrance when the revolving door groaned. The rhythm of the restaurant faltered. Usually, the door opened for men in cashmere coats or women in furs. But the figure that stumbled in brought a gust of cold, wet wind with him. He was an elderly Asian man, slight of build, clutching a plastic bodega bag. He wore a faded, oversized raincoat that was soaked through, dark patches of water staining the shoulders. His grey hair was plastered to his forehead, and he wore cheap, muddy sneakers that squeaked against the pristine marble floor. The silence that fell over the front of the house was immediate. The hostess, a tall blonde named Jessica, who had once modeled for a catalogue in the 90s, froze. Her face twisted into a mask of pure disgust. "Oh, absolutely not," Jessica muttered, stepping out from behind her podium. She held up a manicured hand like a traffic cop. "Excuse me, sir? You cannot be in here." The old man looked up, blinking water from his eyelashes. He looked confused, perhaps a bit disoriented by the warmth and the light. He murmured something soft, barely audible, and took another step forward, leaving a muddy footprint on the white marble. "Stop!" Marcus appeared from the shadows like a shark smelling blood. He marched toward the entrance, his face flushing red with anger. "Jessica, why is the door unlocked for vagrants?" "I don't know, Marcus." "He just shoved his way in," Jessica lied, her voice shrill. The diners turned in their seats, forks paused halfway to mouths. The spectacle had begun. Marcus stopped 2 feet away from the old man, towering over him. He didn't look at the man's face. He looked at the muddy shoes. "Get out," Marcus barked, pointing a finger toward the revolving door. "This is a private establishment. We do not serve handouts, and we do not allow loitering. You are ruining the floor." The old man shivered violently. He clutched the plastic bag to his chest as if it contained gold. He looked at Marcus, his eyes dark and intelligent, though clouded with exhaustion. "Please," the man said, his English heavily accented, broken and slow. "Rain. Very cold. Just tea. Hot tea." "Tea?" Marcus laughed, a cruel, barking sound. He looked around at the diners, performing for his audience. "He wants tea. Listen to me, old man. A pot of tea here costs more than your entire outfit. Go to the shelter on 42nd Street. Get out before I call the police." "I pay," the old man insisted, reaching a trembling hand into his raincoat pocket. He pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. It was wet. Marcus slapped the hand away. The wet bill fluttered to the wet floor. "I don't want your dirty money," Marcus sneered. "I want you gone. You smell like wet dog and poverty. You are disturbing my guests." At table 6, a group of investment bankers laughed. "Go on, Marcus. Toss him out," one of them shouted, raising a glass of champagne. Emily watched from the service station, her heart hammering against her ribs. She felt a wave of nausea. She knew what it was like to be looked at like dirt. She knew what it was like to count pennies. She looked at the old man's hands. They were shaking. He wasn't drunk. He was freezing. He was likely hypothermic. "Marcus," Emily stepped forward, her voice trembling but audible. "It's pouring out there. He's shaking. Maybe we can just seat him at the back. Table 9 is empty. It's near the kitchen. No one will see him." Marcus whipped his head around, his eyes bulging. "Did I ask you, Emily? Did I ask for the opinion of a waitress who is 2 minutes away from being fired?" "He's an old man," Emily pleaded, ignoring Jessica's warning glare. "I'll serve him. I'll pay for the tea myself. Please, just for 20 minutes until the rain stops." Marcus looked at the old man, then at the impatient diners, and finally at Emily. He saw a chance to be benevolent to his charity case employee while keeping the trash out of sight. "Fine," Marcus spat. "Table 9, behind the pillar. If he makes a sound, if he smells up the room, or if anyone complains, you are fired, Emily, instantly, and he pays up front. Pick up that filthy money." Emily didn't hesitate. She knelt on the marble floor and picked up the wet $20 bill. She stood up and offered a gentle smile to the old man, who looked on the verge of collapsing. "Follow me, sir," she said softly. "Let's get you out of the cold." She led him through the dining room. As they walked, she could feel the eyes of the patrons burning into them. Whispers trailed them like smoke. "Disgusting. Why do they let people like that in? I'm losing my appetite," She walked him to the very back, near the swinging kitchen doors. It was a drafty spot, usually reserved for solo diners the restaurant wanted to hide. But to the old man, it seemed to look like a sanctuary. He sat down heavily, the plastic chair groaning. He placed his plastic bag on his lap, refusing to put it on the floor. "Thank you," he whispered, looking up at Emily. His eyes were deep pools of gratitude. "I'll get you a warm towel and that tea right away," Emily said, fighting back tears. She turned to the kitchen, determined to give this man the best service of his life, regardless of what Marcus thought. In the kitchen, the chaos was deafening. Chefs were screaming orders, pans were sizzling, and the heat was oppressive. Emily grabbed a clean white cloth napkin and ran it under the hot water tap at the beverage station. She wrung it out until it was steaming, then placed it on a small silver tray. She prepared a pot of the restaurant's finest sencha. It was a premium Japanese green tea, usually reserved for the VIP menu. She knew Marcus would dock her pay for it, but she didn't care. She arranged the porcelain cup, the pot, and the hot towel with precision. When she returned to table 9, the old man was staring at a painting on the wall. It was a generic abstract piece, but he was studying it with intensity. "Here you go, sir," Emily said, placing the tray down. "This is a hot towel for your hands." The man looked surprised. In most places, he would be lucky to get a paper napkin. He took the steaming cloth and pressed it against his face, inhaling deeply. When he lowered it, some of the tension had left his shoulders. "Sencha," he said, smelling the tea. "Good smell. Not cheap bag tea." "No, sir," Emily smiled. "It's from Shizuoka. It's the best we have." The man froze. He looked up at her sharply. "You know Shizuoka?" Emily hesitated. She looked around to ensure Marcus wasn't within earshot. She took a small step closer to the table, lowering her voice. "Yes," she said. And then she took a breath and switched languages. She didn't speak the broken textbook phrases of a tourist. She spoke with a gentle, formal cadence. "Shizuoka no ocha wa kaori ga totemo yoi desu ne. Samui naka, yoku irashaimashita." The tea from Shizuoka has a wonderful aroma, doesn't it? Welcome, despite the cold. The old man's spoon clattered against his saucer. His jaw dropped slightly. The tired, weathered mask he wore seemed to crack, revealing a sharp, stunned intellect beneath. "Nihongo ga, hanaseru no ka?" he asked, his voice suddenly stronger, the heavy accent he had used with Marcus vanishing into crisp, refined Japanese. "You can speak Japanese?" Emily smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached her eyes. "Sukoshi dake desu. Daigaku de benkyū shimashita. Soshite, oba-chan ga Kyoto shushin deshita." "Only a little. I studied it in university, and my grandmother was from Kyoto." It wasn't entirely the whole story. Emily had been a linguistics major on a full scholarship before her mother got sick. She had dreamed of being a translator for the UN. She had spent a summer in Kyoto, living on rice balls and determination, falling in love with the culture of respect and omotenashi, hospitality. She had dropped out 2 years ago to wait tables and pay hospital bills, but the language was still a secret garden in her mind, a place she went to when the reality of her poverty became too much. The old man looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. He saw the frayed cuffs of her uniform, the fatigue in her eyes, but also the dignity she carried herself with. "My name is Kenji," he said in English, though his tone was different now. It was authoritative, calm. "You are Emily?" He read her name tag. "Yes, Kenji-san. I'm Emily." "Emily-san," he nodded slowly. "Why you help me?" "Your boss. He is not a kind man. You risk your job for a wet old man." Emily poured his tea, ensuring not a single drop spilled. My grandmother used to say that how you treat a guest who can offer you nothing tells you everything about who you are. Besides, she glanced toward the front of the restaurant, where Marcus was laughing with the investment bankers. Everyone deserves a warm cup of tea on a day like this. Please drink. It will warm your bones. Kenji took the cup. He took a sip, closing his eyes. A single tear, unnoticed by anyone but Emily, tracked through the rain streaks on his cheek. It is perfect, he whispered. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the front of the restaurant. Emily jumped. She looked over the partition. Marcus was standing by the entrance, waving his arms frantically. A sleek black limousine had just pulled up to the curb, flanked by 2 black SUVs. The door of the restaurant swung open, and 3 men in dark suits with earpieces walked in, scanning the room. "The Harrington Group," Marcus squeaked, smoothing his hair. "We weren't expecting the security detail first." One of the men in suits ignored Marcus completely. He walked past the hostess stand, his eyes scanning the room with laser focus. He walked past the bankers, past the couples, and headed straight for the back of the restaurant. Straight toward table 9. Marcus chased after him. Sir, the VIP section is this way. You don't want to go back there. We have a situation near the kitchen." The security guard stopped right in front of Emily and the old man. Emily froze. Was Kenji in trouble? Was he a fugitive? The guard looked at the old man in the tattered raincoat. Then, to Emily's shock, the guard bowed. A perfect 90-degree bow of absolute submission. "Sato-sama," the guard said, his voice trembling with reverence. "We have been looking for you everywhere. The board meeting has been paused for an hour. They are panicking." Kenji Sato lowered his teacup slowly. He didn't look at the guard. He looked at Emily. "I was having tea," Kenji said, his voice cool and steel-hard, echoing through the silent restaurant. "With my new friend." Marcus arrived at the table, breathless. He looked from the guard to the old man, and his face went the color of curdled milk. "Sato?" Marcus whispered, the name choking him, as in Kenjiro Sato, the owner of the building. Kenji stood up. He didn't look like a beggar anymore. Despite the dirty coat, he stood with the posture of an emperor. He turned his dark eyes onto Marcus, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Manager," Kenji said, his English perfect now. "You told me I smelled of poverty. You told me I was trash." Marcus began to shake. "Mr. Sato, I didn't know. It was a misunderstanding. Our policy." "Your policy," Kenji interrupted, "is about to change." The silence that gripped the gilded fork was absolute. It was the kind of silence usually reserved for cathedrals or courtrooms before a verdict. The ambient jazz music seemed to grate against the tension in the air. Marcus, the man who had terrified 50 employees for 5 years, was now vibrating with fear. He looked at Kenjiro Sato, the man he had called a vagrant, and then at the security team surrounding table 9. "Mr. Sato," Marcus stammered, his voice cracking. "Please." This is table 9. It's near the kitchen doors. It's drafty. The smell of the dishwasher. Please allow me to escort you to the Platinum Room. We have the vintage Dom Perignon on ice. The Harrington board is arriving any second." Kenjiro Sato slowly sat back down on the cheap plastic chair. He didn't look at Marcus. He looked at Emily, who was standing frozen, clutching the empty silver tray against her chest like a shield. "Emily-san," Sato said, his voice calm, but carrying a weight that made the floorboards tremble. "Is this table uncomfortable?" Emily swallowed hard. She looked at Marcus, whose eyes were pleading with her to lie, to save him. She looked at Sato, whose dark eyes demanded nothing but the truth. "It is a bit cold, sir," she whispered. "And the door swings hit the back of the chair sometimes." Sato nodded. He finally turned his gaze to Marcus. It was a look of such profound disappointment that it felt worse than a scream. "And yet," Sato said, "this is where you put a human being who asked for shelter. You deemed this spot suitable for trash, as you called me. So if it is good enough for a guest in need, it is good enough for me. And it is certainly good enough for the Harrington board." "Sir?" Marcus blinked, sweat dripping down his nose. You want the board of directors to sit here?" "Bring chairs," Sato commanded. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. "And bring a chair for Emily-san." "For the waitress?" Marcus choked out. "No," Sato corrected him sharply. "For my guest. Today Emily is not working. Today she is dining." At that moment, the double mahogany doors at the front of the restaurant swung open. 5 men and 2 women walked in, radiating power. They were the Harrington Group Board, the people who technically owned the Gilded Fork, though they leased the building and brand rights from Sato's conglomerate. At the front was Charles Harrington himself, a man who had never smiled in a photograph. Harrington scanned the room. He saw the empty VIP section. He saw the bewildered diners. Then he saw the huddle of security guards near the kitchen. He spotted the old man in the dirty raincoat. Harrington's face went pale. He practically ran across the dining room, ignoring the hostess, ignoring the bankers. "Kenjiro!" Harrington gasped, arriving at table 9. He looked at the wet coat, the muddy sneakers. "My God, what happened? Did your car break down? Why are you back here?" "I am conducting an inspection, Charles," Sato said dryly. "Sit down." "Here." Harrington looked at the swinging kitchen door, which just opened to reveal a sous chef dropping a pan. "Sit," Sato repeated. Harrington signaled the other board members. In a surreal display of awkwardness, 7 of the most powerful people in New York City dragged heavy wooden chairs from nearby tables, crowding around the small, wobbly table 9. They sat shoulder to shoulder, their expensive suits brushing against the peeling wallpaper. Marcus stood by the side, looking like a man awaiting execution. "Now," Sato said, clasping his hands, "we will have lunch. I hear the tasting menu is $500. I would like to try it." Of course." Marcus jumped forward, desperate to be useful. "I will tell the chef immediately. I will—" "You will not tell the chef," Sato interrupted. "You will wait on us." The restaurant went deadly quiet again. "Me?" Marcus whispered. "You," Sato said. "Emily usually serves this section. But she is my guest. That leaves you. You will serve us. You will pour the wine. You will clear the plates. And if I see a single drop of wine spilled, or if the water glass goes empty for more than 10 seconds, well, Charles here tells me the lease negotiation is coming up next month." Charles Harrington looked at Marcus with eyes that promised murder if he messed this up. "You heard Mr. Sato, Marcus. Get a notepad. Take the order." Emily stood there, paralyzed. "Mr. Sato, I can't sit. I have a shift. I need the money. If I don't work, I don't get the tips." Sato turned to her, his expression softening instantly into that of a kind grandfather. He reached out and tapped the empty chair beside him. "Emily-san," he said gently, "please sit. I promise you, by the end of this meal, money will be the last thing you ever worry about." Trembling, Emily untied her apron. She folded it neatly and placed it on the service station. She sat down next to the billionaire in the raincoat. Across from her, Charles Harrington, a man she had only seen in magazines, gave her a confused, polite nod. Marcus approached the table with a notepad, his hands shaking so badly the paper rattled. May I start you with some sparkling water? Marcus asked, his voice a squeak. Sato didn't look at him. He looked at Emily. What do you think, Emily? Is he displaying the proper attitude? He seems a bit stiff, not very welcoming. Emily looked at Marcus. For 3 months, this man had made her life a living hell. He had mocked her shoes, stolen her brakes, and threatened her job daily. Now, he was looking at her with the eyes of a trapped animal begging for mercy. She took a deep breath. He's nervous, Emily said softly. It's his first time serving a table like this. We should be patient. Sato smiled, a small, genuine quirk of his lips. You have a better heart than I, Emily-san. Very well, Marcus, bring the water, and bring the 1982 Bordeaux, the one you keep in the locked cellar. Marcus turned and ran toward the bar. The meal was a surreal theater of the absurd. The kitchen, aware that the owner of the building and the entire board were sitting at table 9, was sending out food that looked like art. Truffle foam, gold leaf scallops, Wagyu beef that melted on the tongue. But the atmosphere at the table was heavy. The board members ate nervously, terrified of making a sound. They watched Sato, who ate with gusto, still wearing his wet raincoat. Marcus was a wreck. He was sweating profusely, his pristine suit now damp. He fumbled with the cork of the $3,000 bottle of wine. When he poured it, a single red drop ran down the side of the bottle. He lunged to wipe it with a napkin, nearly knocking over Harrington's glass. Clumsy, Sato murmured, not looking up from his soup. Is this the standard of service here, Charles? I apologize, Kenjiro, Charles Harrington said, glaring at Marcus. We will review the management structure immediately. Sato took a sip of the wine. He turned to Emily, who was picking at her food, too anxious to eat. Emily, Sato said quietly, ignoring the powerful men around him. Do you know why I dress like this? He gestured to his muddy raincoat. Emily shook her head. No, Kenji-san. I was born in Tokyo just after the war, Sato began. The table fell silent. Even the clinking of silverware stopped. We had nothing. My father was gone. My mother shined shoes for American soldiers to feed us. I wore a coat like this, too big, full of holes, for 5 years. I know what it is to be cold. I know what it is to be invisible. He looked at the bankers at table 6, who were now trying to pay their bill and leave as quickly as possible. When I made my fortune, I promised I would never forget that feeling. But money makes you forget. It builds walls. People treat you nicely because they want something. They smile because they see a dollar sign, not a man. He placed his hand on the table. It was calloused and weathered. Once a year, I pick one of my properties. A hotel, a restaurant, a resort. I dress as I was when I was a boy. I walk in the front door. I ask for water. I ask for help. Charles Harrington looked as though he might be sick. He knew exactly where this was going. In the last 10 years, Sato continued, his voice hardening, I have been kicked out of 7 of my own lobbies. I have had security called on me 5 times. I have been spat on once. He turned his eyes to Marcus, who was standing by the pillar, holding a water pitcher like a weapon he didn't know how to use. But today, Sato said, today was special. Today I wasn't just kicked out. I was mocked. I was told I polluted the air. Mr. Sato, please, Marcus whimpered. I was just trying to protect the brand. The brand? Sato slammed his hand on the table. The wine glasses jumped. The brand is hospitality. The brand is dignity. You think this crystal chandelier makes this place luxury? No. Luxury is how you make people feel. And you made me feel like an animal. He turned back to Emily. The anger in his eyes vanished. replaced by warmth. And then there was you. You didn't know who I was. You had nothing to gain. In fact, you risked your job. You spent your own money. Money I know you do not have. Sato reached into his raincoat pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. It wasn't money. It was a report. I have a very good investigation team, Emily. When I decided to visit this location, I looked into the staff files. He unfolded the paper. Emily Vance, 24 years old. Mother hospitalized at Mount Sinai with cardiac issues. Outstanding medical debt, $42,000. You work double shifts here, and you tutor on weekends. You haven't missed a day of work in 6 months. Emily's face flushed. Tears pricked her eyes. I manage, sir. You shouldn't have to manage survival while working for $1 billion company, Sato said. He looked at Charles Harrington. Charles, did you know your staff are living below the poverty line while you charge $50 for a salad? We pay market rates, Kenjiro, Charles said defensively, loosening his tie. It's the industry standard. Then the standard is garbage, Sato snapped. He stood up. The entire table scrambled to stand up with him. Marcus, Sato said. Come here. Marcus walked forward, his legs trembling. He looked small, defeated, and pathetic. You like to wield power, Marcus, Sato said. You like to decide who gets to sit, who gets to eat, who gets to work. You enjoy the game of fate. Sato turned to Emily. So, we will play a game. Emily-san, I am going to give you the power of the owner for the next 5 minutes. The room spun for Emily. Me? Yes, Sato said. Marcus's future is in your hands. You have 2 choices. Choice A, you fire him, right now, publicly. You tell him to get out, just as he told me. He loses his severance, his reference, everything. He walks out into the rain. Marcus gasped. He looked at Emily, his eyes wide with terror. He mouthed the word, please. Choice B, Sato continued, watching Emily closely. You let him stay. But he stays on your terms. You decide his demotion. You decide his penance. This is a test, Emily, Sato whispered, leaning in so only she could hear. A man like him will destroy this business if he stays. But a man like him also has a family. Cruelty is easy. Justice is hard. What will you do? Emily looked at Marcus. She remembered the insults. She remembered him making her clean the bathroom with a toothbrush because she was 2 minutes late. She remembered him mocking the old man's wet money. Every instinct in her body screamed to fire him, to humiliate him, to give him a taste of his own poison. She looked at the front door. The rain was still pouring down. It was cold out there. She looked at Sato. He was waiting. Emily took a breath. I have made my decision. The dining room of the Gilded Fork was so quiet you could hear the rain tapping against the glass like impatient fingers. Every eye was on Emily. The bankers, the board of directors, the kitchen staff peering through the porthole window, everyone waited. Marcus was pale, sweating, his hands clasped together as if in prayer. He looked at Emily with a desperate, pathetic hope. He knew she was soft. He knew she needed this job. He was betting on her weakness. Emily looked at him. She thought about the single mother who had been fired last week because her car broke down. She thought about the way Marcus spoke to the cleaning crew, as if they were furniture. I choose option B, Emily said, her voice steady. Marcus let out a breath that sounded like a sob. Thank you, Emily. Thank you. I promise I will be better. I will listen to you. I will. I'm not finished. Emily cut him off. Her tone was different now. It had steel in it. It was the voice of someone who had survived poverty and came out stronger. She turned to Sato. Mr. Sato, you said I decide his penance. You said he stays on my terms. Precisely, Sato nodded, his eyes twinkling. Marcus stays, Emily said, looking Marcus dead in the eye. But not as general manager. He doesn't know what it means to serve. He only knows how to command. And you can't lead until you know what it feels like to follow. She pointed to the bus tub full of dirty dishes near the wait station. He starts at the bottom, the very bottom. He is a bus boy. He scrapes the plates, he mops the floors, he cleans the bathrooms, and he does it for minimum wage, with no tips. The colour drained from Marcus's face completely. Emily, you can't be serious. I have a mortgage. I have a lease on a BMW. I can't live on minimum wage. I do, Emily said simply. I live on it every day. If I can do it, surely a man of your talent can figure it out. She turned back to Sato. That is my decision. If he refuses, then he is fired. If he accepts, he has 6 months to prove he understands what humility is. Sato threw his head back and laughed. It was a loud, joyous sound. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Did you hear that, Charles? Charles Harrington nodded vigorously. Loud and clear. Marcus, hand over your keys to the office. Grab an apron. The dishwasher is backed up. Marcus stood frozen for a moment. He looked at the door, then at the table of powerful men, then at Emily. He realized he had no choice. With trembling hands, he took off his expensive suit jacket. He undid his silk tie. He walked over to the service station, grabbed a stained white apron, and tied it around his waist. He picked up the bus tub. It was heavy. Table 4 needs clearing, Marcus, Emily said, echoing the words he had said to her just an hour ago. Move it. Marcus lowered his head. Yes, Mum. The transition of power at the Gilded Fork was not a quiet affair. It was a seismic shift that rattled the very foundations of the establishment. When Marcus handed over the heavy brass key ring to Emily, his hands shook with a tremor that had nothing to do with the cold and everything to do with the sudden, crushing weight of reality. He wasn't just losing a job title. He was losing his identity. For 5 years, Marcus had been the god of this small, golden universe. Now, he was its peasant. The first week was a brutal education in physics and humility. Marcus, who had spent years critiquing the Polish on silverware from a distance, was now intimately acquainted with the scalding heat of the industrial dishwasher. His Italian suits, now locked in a garment bag in the back of his car, were replaced by a stiff, white uniform that was 2 sizes too small, tight around the shoulders and unflattering. The kitchen staff, led by Chef Gordon, a man Marcus had once fined for smiling too much during service, watched the fallen tyrant with a mixture of disbelief and vindictive satisfaction. Hey, new guy, Gordon barked on the 3rd day, slamming a tray of lasagna pans onto the metal counter. The sauce was burnt onto the edges, a nightmare to clean. Scrape these, and don't use the steel wool. You'll scratch the coating. Use your fingernails if you have to. Marcus stared at the pans. The steam from the dish pit had frizzed his hair, and sweat was stinging his eyes. Chef, this is going to take an hour. Then you better start now, Gordon grinned, turning his back. Miss Vance wants the station clear by 5. Miss Vance? The name tasted like ash in Marcus's mouth. Every time he heard it, he felt a spike of humiliation. Emily sat in the glass-walled office that used to be his. From the dish pit, through the swinging doors, Marcus could sometimes catch a glimpse of her. She wasn't shouting, she wasn't pacing. She was sitting with the ledger or talking to the staff, actually listening to them. The physical toll was immediate. By Friday, Marcus's feet were covered in blisters. His lower back screamed in protest every time he bent down to pick up a dropped napkin. He realized, with a sinking horror, that he had banned the busboys from using the rubber floor mats because he thought they looked ugly. Now, standing on the hard marble for 10 hours straight, he understood the cruelty of his own aesthetic choices. But the worst moment came on Saturday night. The restaurant was packed. The Harrington Group executives were back, bringing clients. Marcus was clearing table 4, the very table where he had insulted Sato. He was balancing a heavy tray of dirty martini glasses and half-eaten appetizers. "Excuse me, waiter?" A sharp voice cut through the noise. Marcus froze. He knew that voice. It was David, a hedge fund manager, and one of Marcus's former drinking buddies. David was sitting with a beautiful woman, pointing his fork at Marcus. Marcus turned slowly, praying the floor would open up and swallow him. "Marcus!" David's eyes went wide, then crinkled with amusement. He let out a loud, braying laugh that stopped conversations at nearby tables. "My God, is that you? I thought you were running this joint." Marcus gripped the tray until his knuckles turned white. I am currently undergoing a restructuring of my position, David." "Restructuring," David hooted, slapping the table. "You're clearing my leftover shrimp tails, buddy. Oh, this is rich. Hey everyone, look at Marcus. From Dom Perignon to dishwater." The table erupted in laughter. Marcus felt the heat rise up his neck, burning his face. His eyes stung. He wanted to throw the tray. He wanted to scream. He wanted to walk out the door and never come back. Then a shadow fell over the table. "Is there a problem with the service here, gentlemen?" The laughter died instantly. Emily stood there. She wasn't wearing an apron. She was wearing a tailored navy blazer, her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. She didn't look like a waitress. She looked like the owner. Her voice was calm, but it held a dangerous edge. David cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. No. No problem. Just saying hello to an old friend." "Excellent," Emily said, her gaze drilling into David. "Because at the Gilded Fork, we treat every member of our staff with the same respect we afford our guests, from the general manager to the busboys. If that culture doesn't suit you, there is a lovely fast food establishment down the block." Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. David nodded quickly, looking down at his plate. "Understood. Sorry." Emily turned to Marcus. She didn't smile. She didn't baby him. She simply nodded at the tray. "Carry on, Marcus. Table 7 needs water." As Marcus walked away, his heart pounding, he realized something that shook him to his core. In 5 years, he had never defended his staff. In 5 days, the woman he had tormented had defended him against his own friends. The weeks bled into months. The anger Marcus felt began to dull into a numb exhaustion, and then, slowly, into something else. Perspective. He learned that the dishwasher, Carlos, had 3 kids and worked 2 jobs. He learned that Jessica, the hostess, had chronic back pain from the heels he had forced her to wear. He learned that the kitchen staff stayed late every night, not because they were slow, but because the prep lists he used to write were mathematically impossible to finish on time. One rainy Tuesday in December, the hard karma hit its peak. The basement sump pump failed. The kitchen began to flood with icy, grey water during the dinner rush. In the old days, Marcus would have stood on a crate, screaming at the staff to bail the water while he called a plumber from his dry office. But Emily was already knee-deep in the water. She had kicked off her heels and was rolling up her pant legs. She was passing buckets to Chef Gordon. "We need to protect the dry storage," she shouted over the alarm. "Marcus, grab the sandbags from the back alley." Marcus stood at the top of the stairs. He was dry. He could just leave. He could say it wasn't his job description. He could let her fail. If the kitchen flooded, the restaurant would close. Emily would look incompetent. And maybe, just maybe, he could get his old job back. He looked at Emily, struggling with a heavy bucket, her face smeared with grease, fighting to save the restaurant that Sato had entrusted to her. He looked at the staff, the people he had abused, working as a team, united by her leadership. Cruelty is easy, Sato had said. Justice is hard. Marcus cursed under his breath. He ripped off his white uniform jacket. He ran out to the alley, grabbed 2 40-pound sandbags, and sprinted back down the stairs. He waded into the freezing water next to Emily. "Move!" Marcus grunted, shoving a sous chef aside to jam the sandbag against the leaking door. "It's not sealing. We need more weight. Carlos, get on top of the bags." For 3 hours they fought the water. They were freezing, wet, and miserable. But they worked like a machine. Marcus knew the building's plumbing better than anyone. He directed the flow, creating a dam that diverted the water away from the expensive ingredients. When the emergency plumber finally arrived at 11 p.m., the kitchen was a mess, but the food was safe. The staff collapsed on the dry floor of the dining room. Someone passed around a bottle of cheap whiskey. Emily sat on the floor, wet and shivering, her hair a disaster. She looked at Marcus, who was wringing out his socks. "You could have stayed upstairs," she said quietly. Marcus didn't look at her. He looked at his hands, calloused, cut and stained. The dry storage has the truffles. If we lost those, the food cost percentage would have ruined the quarter. I couldn't let the numbers drop. Emily laughed. It was a tired, genuine laugh. "Always the numbers, Marcus." "No," Marcus whispered, finally looking at her. "Not just the numbers. You were down there alone." It was the closest thing to an apology he had ever given. And in the dim light of the closed restaurant, the barrier between master and servant finally dissolved. The 90 days of probation were up. The deadline Sato had set hung over the restaurant like a sword. On the morning of the inspection, the restaurant shone. It wasn't just clean. It felt alive. The stiff, fearful atmosphere was gone, replaced by a hum of efficient, warm energy. Emily stood by the entrance, checking the reservation book. She was nervous. She hadn't heard from Kenjiro Sato since that fateful lunch. At noon precisely, the revolving door spun. Kenjiro Sato walked in. He wasn't alone. He was accompanied by Charles Harrington and a team of lawyers carrying thick leather briefcases. Sato looked immaculate in a charcoal 3-piece suit, his silver hair perfectly combed. But his eyes were searching. He didn't look at the decor. He didn't look at the menu. He looked at the faces of the staff. He saw Jessica laughing as she seated a family. He saw the bus boys moving with purpose, not panic. Then he saw Marcus. Marcus was polishing the brass railing near the bar. He saw Sato enter. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He folded his polishing cloth, placed it in his apron pocket, and walked over to the group. Marcus stood tall. He was thinner than before. The bloating from expensive lunches and alcohol was gone. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear. "Good afternoon, Mr. Sato," Marcus said, bowing respectfully. "Mr. Harrington, welcome back to the Gilded Fork." Sato studied him for a long, uncomfortable silence. "Marcus, you are still here." "I am, sir." "And how is the view from the bottom?" Sato asked, his voice neutral. "It offers a different perspective, sir," Marcus replied. "I learned that the marble is hard. I learned that the water is hot. And I learned that a manager is nothing without the people he supports." Sato's expression didn't change. He turned to Emily. "Emily-san," Sato said. "Report." Emily stepped forward. She didn't need notes. She knew every inch of the business now. Revenue is up 18%. Staff turnover has dropped to 0. We have implemented a profit-sharing program for the kitchen staff, which has reduced food waste by 12% because they now have a stake in the inventory. Harrington's jaw dropped. Profit sharing? For dishwashers? Emily, that wasn't authorized by the board. It was authorized by common sense, Emily said firmly, and the results speak for themselves. Sato held up a hand to silence Harrington. He looked from Emily to Marcus. The experiment is concluded, Sato announced. The room went deadly still. Marcus, Sato said, take off that apron. Marcus closed his eyes. This was it. He was being fired. He reached behind his back and untied the knot. He pulled the stained white apron over his head and held it in his hands. You are fired, Sato said. Marcus nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. I understand, sir. Thank you for the lesson. Truly. I am firing you as a busboy, Sato continued, and I am firing you as a general manager. You are not fit for either. Marcus looked up, confused. Sato gestured to the lawyers. One of them stepped forward and placed a document on a table. Emily Vance, Sato said, his voice booming. You have proven that leadership is not about fear. It is about service. You passed the test I didn't even know I was setting. He turned to Marcus. And you proved that a man can be broken and rebuilt. You stayed, you worked, you bled, you learned humility. Sato picked up the document. I am dissolving the current management contract with the Harrington Group for this location, Sato said casually, as if ordering a coffee. Charles Harrington sputtered. Kenjiro, you can't do that. The lease. I own the building, Charles. I can do whatever I want. Sato smiled. I am creating a new entity. This restaurant will now be an independent operator. He handed the document to Emily. Emily Vance, you are the new owner and CEO of the Gilded Fork. The deed is in this trust. It is yours. You answer to no one but your guests. Emily gasped, clutching the table for support. The room spun. Mr. Sato, I don't know what to say. Say yes, Sato winked. But, Sato turned to Marcus, an empress needs a general, someone who knows the plumbing, someone who knows the numbers, someone who will do the dirty work, so she can lead. Sato looked at Marcus. Marcus, Emily is now your employer, not me. If she wants to hire you as her director of operations, that is her choice. If she wants to throw you out, that is also her choice. All eyes turned to Emily. She looked at Marcus. She saw the man who had mocked the poor. But she also saw the man who had stood in freezing water for 3 hours to save her kitchen. She saw a man who had been stripped of his ego and found his humanity underneath. Marcus, Emily said softly. Yes, Miss Vance. The suit, she said, a small smile playing on her lips. Go put it back on. You look ridiculous in that apron. Marcus looked at her, stunned. Tears welled in his eyes, real tears this time. You want me to stay? I need a director of operations, Emily said, extending her hand. But Marcus, if I ever hear you raise your voice to a staff member again. I know. Marcus grasped her hand, shaking it firmly. I'll be scrubbing the toilets with a toothbrush. I promise, Emily. I won't let you down. Later that afternoon, after the lawyers had left and the shock had worn off, the restaurant was quiet. The rain had started again, tapping against the glass. Kenjiro Sato sat at table 9, the drafty table near the kitchen. Emily walked over, carrying a silver tray. On it was a single porcelain cup and a cast-iron pot of Shizuoka sencha. She placed it down gently. Omatase shimashita, she whispered. Thank you for waiting. Sato looked at the tea. Then he looked at Emily, who was now standing in her own restaurant, a billionaire in spirit, if not yet in bank account. You know, Sato said, blowing on the steam, I have thousands of employees. I have towers in Tokyo, London, Dubai. But do you know where I will eat my lunch from now on? Where, Kenji-san? Right here. He tapped the wobbly table. Because this is the only place in New York where the tea tastes like home. He took a sip, closed his eyes, and sighed with contentment. Now, Sato opened his eyes, sharp and mischievous. I believe I am a paying customer today, and I hear the owner is very busy. Go, run your empire, Emily-san. Emily bowed deeply, a bow of profound gratitude and respect. Yes, sir. Right away. She turned and walked toward the front of the house, her heels clicking on the marble floor. She walked past Marcus, who was respectfully showing a young couple to their table. He caught her eye and gave a subtle, respectful nod. Emily pushed open the heavy brass doors of the entrance, looking out at the rainy streets of New York. The city was grey and cold, but inside the gilded fork, everything was golden and warm. She had saved a stranger, and in return he had given her the world. Karma, she realized, wasn't just about punishment. It was about balance, and finally the scales were even. What an incredible turnaround. From being invisible and mistreated to owning the very place where she was once humiliated. Emily's story proves that true power isn't about the suit you wear or the money in your pocket. It's about the content of your character. Marcus learned the hard way that the toes you step on today might be attached to the foot that kicks you out tomorrow. Kenjiro Sato showed us that kindness is an investment that always yields the highest return. It makes you wonder, how many times have we walked past someone in need, not realizing that they held the keys to our future? If this story moved you, or if you believe that karma always finds a way, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. And tell me in the comments, if you were Emily, would you have fired Marcus, or would you have made him a busboy? I read every comment. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.